In this lecture, we are going to take a quick look at PHP functions, their definitions, and the semantics of passing parameters to PHP functions. So first of all, I want to cover the way that functions are declared in PHP. You'll see here that the syntax is basically to have the function keyword, then the function name, excuse me, and then parameters for the function. The parameters are what we will talk about in the next couple of slides. I just wanted to mention here that you can actually have embedded functions, so nested functions. So I can take, in this function body, I can describe functions that have scope within the function in which they are defined. So the first type of semantic for parameter passing within PHP is the pass by value, and basically you just describe you just list the names of the parameters using again the $ symbol to indicate a variable. And what happens with this is that the scope of these parameters is just within the functions, and what that means is that if I make a modification to one of these variables, one of these parameters within the function body, that change will not be propagated back up to the actual parameter. And so any change that you might make would be lost. Typically when you're using parameter semantics of pass by value, you're basically getting the value for P1 and P2, using that to compute some function, and then returning the value to the caller. The second kind of parameter semantic is the pass by reference, and the difference here is that you use the ampersand to indicate which parameters are being passed by reference. Now the semantics here are that if you make a modification to P1, the parameter that has been passed in by reference, that change will be propagated to the variable that was passed into the function. So with this parameter semantic, again, it allows you to make a modification to the actual parameter, and again, you do need to use the ampersand to indicate which parameter is being passed by reference. Now there are a couple of other things that you can do with PHP in the way of defining your functions. One of them is to provide a default argument value. So shown here is the syntax. You basically set a parameter equal to some value, and the parameter then will take that value if the parameter is not provided in the call. And we'll see an example of this when we start looking at some code. And actually, you can see examples of this in the text in the reading. Another thing that you can do is have what is called an optional argument, which is slightly different from a default argument. An optional argument must be the last argument within the parameter list, and you basically set the value equal to an empty equals, as shown here. Basically what this does then is allow you to have sort of a variable length list of parameters. I probably wouldn't suggest using default, or sorry, not default, but rather optional parameters. I think it's better to make it explicit. But I think using default arguments is perfectly fine. But optional, I think, is probably something that you want to avoid. The last slide here is on return values, and the reason that it is worth noting is that with a return statement you can do sort of like the normal return where you just return a single value, but in PHP you can also return several elements. And actually I need to modify this slide. There's an error here. Actually we need just one more thing. We need to return user back up. Oops, what am I doing? So what happens here is that you can instantiate an array within a function, and then you can return that array um, using the return statement. And what will happen is that in PHP you can take that function and make a call to it, and using the list function you can indicate which of the what the names of each of the elements are within the expected return. And what will happen is that this array that's created will be used to instantiate these elements within the list. So if I have an array where I set the first value to hello and I set the second value to world and then I return that, then this list function right here will take those two values, put them into message 1 and message 2. So anyway, that's a brief overview of functions within PHP. Again, uh, take a look at the text. It has several examples and other things that I haven't covered here. I've just given you the highlights. So anyway, that concludes this lecture.